guest today is Bart Yasso, the mayor of running, author of 100 Runs of a Lifetime, the world's ultimate races and trails. How are you doing, Bart? You know what? And what
I'm
got you
doing well,
started
Nick.
with the whole running thing?
Yeah. So I started in the mid 70s, just wanted to go out and run. Looked bad. I had to like cut off jeans and a t-shirt and just went out for a run one day. And little did I know how much I would enjoy it and keep at it and eventually have a 31-year career at Runner's World magazine and get inducted in the Hall of Fame of running and all the stuff that happens just didn't seem possible. I was just out there trying to, run 1 mile the first time I was out there to see if I could run two, and then eventually run 100 miles a week in my prime. It's a crazy journey, but I love it.
It's such a crazy journey because you think about it, you're running, and you can, and you just do it, right? And it's the
Yeah.
challenge has to be what keeps you wanting to do more, right? How do you feel when you run?
Yeah, I still love it. I run a lot slower than I used to run in my younger days, but I'm still out there. I still have the same passion and the same joy about it. Then there's different ways to stay involved in the sport. I don't do as many races as I used to do. I do a lot of ceremonious things when I'm at a race, speak at dinners and do finish line race announcing, greet people at the finish line, find some of the great stories in these races. And so I'm still involved. And then, one day I got a call from National Geographic. Would you author this book, 100 Runs of a Lifetime? And I was like, what a dream call to get.
Yeah, exactly. Working with Nat Geo in so many ways, so fantastic. What should we expect from the book? It's beautiful, by the way. I received a copy. Amazing. But what should we expect?
Yeah, so what had it, Neil, it's separated by what they call parts, 4 parts. So the first part is races that are less than the marathon distance. The marathon distance is 26.2 miles. It's shorter distance races. Then the second part is marathons, like the Pittsburgh Marathon, which is this weekend, and also has shorter distance races involved in it. Then the third part is what we call ultras or trails, races that are run on trails. And the ultra distance is anything above the marathon, longer than the marathon distance. Most of the trails are 50K, 50 mile. The ultras start off with a 50K and then people get into 50 milers and 100 milers. And then the final part of the book, part four, is actually just runs, not races. So you can go out and do it any day you want to. You can start whenever you want to, finish whenever you want to. You can do half the trail or the entire distance. They're just cool locations to run on these trails and beautiful places.
Yeah, definitely. When you think about it, they're so. How did you come up with the idea? Which ones of these 100 runs? How did you rank?
Yeah, Neil, it was so hard. It was unbelievable. I went through, when you've been running for 48 years and I had all these memories and all these, I had to organize where I ran, 54 countries or something like that, and all the places I've been. And I kind of sorted it all out and I narrowed it down to 200, which doesn't do you any good when the book is called 100 Runs of a Lifetime. So, I got 200 down to 150, 150 down to 125, 125 down to 110. Then it was really hard to get from 110 to 100 to take out races that I really just had such great memories of. And I think people would like, but I had to get it down to 100. And
So
I
were
was
they
able to
all
pull that off.
races? Every one of your runs on in the book are races?
No, no, there's 31. The part four is 31 that are not a race. So I'll give you an example. Well, I started off with there's a 22-mile trail, 11 miles out, 11 miles back along the Pali Coast in Kauai, the Hawaiian island of Kauai. It's just an incredible trail that you can run. Now you can run part of it and turn around and run back. You don't have to run the whole 11 miles out, 11 miles back. It's pretty rough and can be muddy and it's a tough run. But things like that, and I talk about this run I did. I was in Darjeeling, India, and I ran through these tea fields. The tea field farmer said, "Yes, you can run right through the field. There's an open space in between all the tea, and just incredible run." And then I found out about this trail, which was close by, and I went to a town called Manapajang and ran to a town called Sandafu. And Sandafu's up in the mountains, up in the Himalaya. And it was when you got up there, there was a little overlook, and you could see four of the five highest peaks in the world. And they claim it's the only location in the world that you can see four of the five highest peaks. So I thought that's a cool way to end a run. And then the next day I ran back down. But things like that, and that's one you can do whenever you want. If you want to go to Darjeeling or go to India, it's up to you. But this sets a framework. I want runners to think big and to think create their own 100 runs of a lifetime.
Yeah, because you got, and I think, what about people that aren't runners? Could they walk a lot of these?
Yeah, there's a lot of these trails you could walk, absolutely. And just, the longer ones, you just do part of it because, you have to get back before most of them, you have to get off the trail before sunset. So you can just run part of it and you don't have to be a runner. You can definitely hike, walk. You should be someone that's actually training because some of them are pretty, tough to do, but you can definitely walk them if you want to.
Did you have a lot of the pictures from did you documented a lot of your,
Yeah.
is that another reason why National Geographic reached out to you, is you document all your
I,
experiences?
I did document a lot of my experiences, and there's only one photo in the book that I'm in, and it's actually a photo that I didn't take. It was taken by the Big Sur Marathon race, and they sent it to me. But all the photos are National Geo.
Yeah. Oh,
When I
wow.
created the book map on where I was going and what run and what race we were doing or what trail, they went out and got the photos, and the quality of the photos are just mind-boggling. As you would know, National Geographic has
Oh,
I don't know how
absolutely.
big their database of the greatest photographers in the world. They're connected with them.
Do you think that the
Yeah.
people are going to want a second book out of this Nat Geo where you
Well,
can
I
add
hope
more
so.
runs?
That would be the greatest thing for me because I had more runs. It just when a book is called 100 Runs of a Lifetime, you got to do 100. I actually did sneak in one that I did. So what I called my ultimate run of a lifetime, I have it in the intro. So it's not in all the parts that number all the runs, but I snuck it in the intro, a run in Tanzania in the Ngorongoro crater, which is a crater
Oh, wow.
18 and a half miles around, 2,000 feet deep. And I convinced you're not supposed to get out of the vehicles. You go down there and safari all day and take photos of all the animals. But I asked the guy if I could run up the crater wall, and he was kind of dubious about my idea, but he let me do it. And got up to the rim of the crater right at sunset, one of those classic African sunsets over the Serengeti. It was my run of a lifetime. I didn't know it at the time. I just called it my forever famous favorite run. Now I
It's
call it my
interesting, Bart.
lifetime run,
This
and I snuck that into the intro. Oh,
What's really wild about this, the themes of my weeks of interviews, where I do all these as podcasts and then make them go to my nationally syndicated radio show where I have certain fame, but also I'm one of the top celebrity podcasts in the world according to FeedSpot. We're ranked 14 now. We want to get back up. We're really having some really kick butt. But you and another guest this week did things that you kind of train your body beyond belief. Like the level, this guy was known from the Dalai Lama and stuff like that. I can't pronounce his name, but you both are very well known in your spaces. And then I had somebody else that was just biking places that was doing this. So many people are doing this for solitude. So can you explain how much of your running experience doing all these races and stuff is for solitude purposes and training and developing?
a lot for solitude. That's why I tend to always run on trails. I love to hear the birds and see the animals, and much more than I like to see vehicular traffic. So I tend to run on single track trails. We got a ton of them in Pennsylvania. They're very accessible where I live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And it's solitude is what it's all about. I mean, you really get out and sort your day out. And, I don't call them sort out your troubles because I really don't have troubles. I don't look at them as troubles. It just sort out what you want to accomplish more
Yeah,
in
you
that
have a
day.
passion. Everyone needs to have a passion, especially when there's so much unknown. It could be bad unknown, it could be good unknown. We don't know right now in the world we live in today. So we have to have something that makes us every day want to get up and do something. And I know running's that for you. So people can go pick up your
Yeah.
book, all finer bookstores for sure, independent
Oh yeah.
bookstores. And is there a place where we can find info on you, Bart? I just looked you up
Yeah,
on
I do have
Wiki. Mm.
Yeah,
So
I do have bartyasso.com, and on there's a link to send you to places where you buy the book. And I do post on my social media if I'm doing a book signing somewhere.
So my guest today is Daria Brooke. Um, and Daria, I love the fact that your book is of my own making. And I'm so excited to talk to you about this. It's a must read, but there's so many things when you talk about childhood trauma and how you're leading back through this, how you're going through the process. And through this book, it was really self-reflecting, wasn't it?
It was. It was. I definitely feel like it allowed me or forced me, I don't know which, to come in contact with a lot of versions of myself, and in some cases, versions that at the time may have felt too fragile to make the journey here. And so it was also very much, I think, a reclamation and kind of a knitting together of all those aspects of my life in a special way.
So let's talk about childhood trauma. Did you identify it was childhood trauma from the beginning when you kind of to where your success is today? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, people in the C-suite, we know how to go through adversity. We know how to get literally hit back many, many times. So that's why we get
Mhm.
back up and fight again. So tell me
Yes.
kind of that journey without giving the book away, but more of just that process of where you saw it self-reflecting. Did you identify childhood trauma later in your life, or was it early in once you kind of got out?
I was an adult, certainly. I was in business school. I will tell you, even now, it's taken me years to even use the word abuse, because that was hard. I think accepting that can be really difficult. But I was about 26 when it first registered that it was a series of traumatic events that I had experienced as a child. And it was through therapy that I sort of, stumbled into therapy and then found myself being confronted with the reality and having someone actually name it for me. It took a while, I think, to metabolize that idea, because you're right. I think it's very easy to think about our resilience as such a strength and all the ways in which we're forged through challenging experiences. But there is a distinction between adversity and challenging experiences and childhood trauma and abuse. And it was important to name it as it really is.
How did you define it as abuse that you didn't see it as a child as abuse, or even until you said your 20s?
I think I probably knew it. I just couldn't admit it, and I couldn't say it out loud. I didn't tell my story to anyone for many years. I was in college before I told even my first friend about the childhood that I had growing up with, my dad was largely absent, but both of my parents struggled with drug addiction, and I grew up in extreme poverty. And to say that out loud, in some ways, I think felt very much like bringing it back into the life that I was running away from. So it took me a while to be able to say it. I think it's as healing as is a practice. I think the stories that we tell ourselves and the relationship that we have with those stories is also evolving. And so I can mark, certainly at 19 telling a friend for the first time, at 26 going to therapy, at 31, 30, different milestones in my life where I formed a different level of relationship to the way in which I was brought up and the ways in which it was traumatic.
But absolutely. And you think about these things, but you identified those factors. But what about extreme poverty? How it really, at times, even for me who grew up in an upper middle class family, I had
Mm.
poverty as an entrepreneur. I was almost
Yes.
homeless multiple times after my separation and divorce. So I
Mm.
had to go through all those different things of confronting not having enough money as a child, you see that from your family. You see it from specific things. And how did that kind of shape you in a way that wasn't good? And it also shaped you in a good way. And this is where the
Yeah.
reflection has to every experience we live in life. that happens. It really does.
Absolutely. It does. And I think it's just sometimes a question of when it happens. It was important to me to look at what scarcity does to the brain and how it can inhibit its ability to create, to innovate, and to dream,
Yeah, truly.
because I think our environments absolutely play a critical role in that. When you're steeped in that, when that's integral or foundational to your early years, recreating that becomes easy to do when your sort of first initial wiring is rooted in lack. I think for me, it was so obvious that we were deeply poor. We would go without a working telephone. Our lights would get turned off. We didn't have running water sometimes.
Oh my God.
I've
Yeah.
taken 1 inch baths before. So I think I was really clear as a young person what poverty was. And by the time I got to high school, I got a vision of what it was not. I went to school
Right,
with a
right.
lot of upper middle class kids. I tested into my high school, so it was a college preparatory school. And so I was surrounded for the first time by people who had real means, and I
Mm,
could understand what that also looked like. And but I think, and so I spoke a little bit to how it can negatively impact us. It limits our thinking. It ultimately shrinks our view, and our
mm.
focus is just on
Yep.
survival. When you have more and you actually aren't in survival mode so much, you then can expand and
Right.
have the capacity to start to imagine more as well.
So, how did you overcome? So, you had that scarcity mindset growing up. Okay, so I had the same scarcity mindset. Okay, because my father
Well, I
was
don't
from
know that I
depression.
did. If I could
Okay,
say,
so
I don't know that I
you
did,
know
but
did, but it was in
I
your. It
think
still was
it's
in your subconscious in some sort of way.
yes,
If
yes,
I had that conversation with you, okay, this is us
yes,
working therapy session. You've never thought
exactly.
radio, podcast, TV interview you're having. We're having a therapy
Exactly.
session right now.
That's
That's
right.
okay because we're sharing war stories. But you had that in your subconscious, that scarcity. How did you get out? First of all, then I want to go to when you saw that childhood trauma. What did it make you do that caused
Mm.
other relationships hurt, other things hurt, till you finally overcame those? In a way
Yeah.
without giving the book away. There's more of a therapy session. We're throwing things at each
I
other and
love
seeing
it.
how it is. Yeah.
Seeing how it sticks. No, it's great. I mean, I think certainly I was surrounded by scarcity, and I knew that that was at play. I think understanding the ways in which it showed up in my life really manifest in the ways that I played small, the ways in which I would tell myself, oh, and that sounds funny for some people because I'm extremely ambitious and I have a
Very
resume that
successful.
many
Yes.
people would find impressive. But staying in jobs where I wasn't allowed to flourish and be expansive and bring my talent because maybe someone felt threatened by that, or staying in relationships too long where you think that, gosh, if this person just could understand that, communication is good or whatever it is, that you think that you can sort of love somebody through or stick it out through difficult times. And it can be tempting to tell yourself that this is the best it's going to be, even especially when you've achieved a certain level. So when you're at a company like a L'Oreal or an Estee Lauder, it can be very easy and tempting to say, I've got this big job, I have a lot of responsibility. Why would I question that? I think the ways in which I got out of it were painfully,
No, but so
usually.
you got to this point. I'm asking so you misunderstood my question. I definitely want to see how you got yourself when you were in these high C-suite positions to where you are now. But what about getting out of poverty? How did you do that? Was that just
Mm,
straight, I'm motivated, focused in school,
yes.
I'm not going to take anything, and used the scarcity mindset as a good thing, not a bad thing, saying I'm never going to put myself in that position, and maybe
Yeah, I think
overworked yourself, did certain things because you were always afraid that there would be not enough money?
yes, absolutely. I mean, I think fear of lack, fear of not feeling safe, of having stability, for me was the root of all of it, and really drove me for years. And school was the way out. It's really simple. When you're a kid, you don't have a lot of options. I got my first job at 14, 15 years old. But before that, all I had was school. And that was where I did well and I was affirmed. And I saw that as the way out. And that was enough of a meme, particularly in the 80s and 90s, where you could believe that if you were a good student and you did well,
You
that
got out.
that was a gateway out. And
And
so
this
that's
might not anymore, but that time absolutely was.
tunnel vision. And I think for a lot of people that is still true. I think that there are ways in which, in particularly, as a woman and a Black woman, where having an education and having access to the best universities played a meaningful role in my ability to do so.
Absolutely. So you worked hard, you overworked yourself, meaning you worked really hard in school to get to where you are. Then once you got to school, you worked to be the very best. And then when you got to the jobs, you the very, very best. So you identified probably through that scarcity mindset that the only way I could do it is work really, really hard and have tunnel vision and forget about the things around me. And then that's when you identified for yourself, oh my gosh, I want more, and went to therapy and then uncovered why. Does that
I
sound
ish, yes, I had a tunnel vision in getting out, absolutely. And I saw that as the only way out. And I was running away from Detroit. When you come from family addiction and violence, um, you either get mired in it or you run away from it. I ran away from it. My decision to go to therapy was quite accidental. I went wanting to troubleshoot one specific problem. My graduation from business school was coming up. I knew that I wasn't going to have family or anybody in attendance there, and that was going to be noticed by my classmates. And I hadn't told most of them, they didn't know about my family background. And I went to therapy to try to figure out how to script what I would say when that time came. And it was only then that my therapist said, well, wait, help me understand, why won't anybody be there? And where are your parents? And all of that. And that was the beginning of the healing journey and kind of the awakening to, oh, the getting out wasn't the work, air quote.
Yeah.
The work starts now.
So once you talked to the therapist, what were the underlying things? You talked about childhood trauma, but what about in your personal life that now? Because if we overcame it, we got to where we are, we're just completely focused on success, and
Yes.
growing. There was a missing thing the therapist spotted at that time, right?
Yeah, a number of things. I mean, number one, she diagnosed me with CPTSD, so complex PTSD, which
Wow.
is after sustained exposure to traumatic events. But also the ways in which I was not allowing myself to be seen, the ways in which I had over identified with performance and success, and how singular in a lot of ways my identity was as a result of that, and how that manifested in relationships that I had. I was dating someone at the time, and my therapist and I had come up with the exercise for me to ask him, who am I if you take my resume away? Who am I without all of these things? And he was like, that's crazy. I don't know. I couldn't dare to answer that question. You are all of these things. You've achieved them. And I think it was such a window into the way in which that I was not always allowing myself to be seen fully beyond what I thought I had to offer people, which in my mind at that time, we're talking 15 years ago, was the resume, was the success, was the performative aspects of all the things that made people go, ooh, that's
Right.
cool. Yeah.
Exactly, because you're a high achiever, but you're dealing with specific things. So you really, as I said, probably had a lot of tunnel vision and relationship, everything, because it was all focused on your career and your resume. And that was a great
Yes.
point. So what did you do to heal yourself? Even though in a way that you were on your way, what an
Yes.
accomplishment you've accomplished to get to where you are. But
Thank
what
you.
did you do in the healing? Because you and I were talking on off air about, you talked about neuroplasticity. I saw it in your
Yes.
press release and things like that. And I talk about, bioneurofeedback and having this on my brain and going through these. I'm sharing things I've never shared on a show, but I do these
Wow.
now. That's how I go ahead and that's how I've decided. Go out there, throw it to the world, and who cares? But
Yes.
ultimately, going through that and viewing those things, what did you kind of say to heal yourself? What things did you do? Because therapy's great, but therapy gives us
Yes.
what we need to work on. People think
Yes.
therapy's going to fix everything. It's not. It's going to be do we need to work on? It's just like going to the doctor. Hey, I have a heart
Yes.
condition. I have something else. But what am I going to do the work when I don't see that doctor? when I'm not
Exactly.
using medication. So good.
Yes, therapy brings it all up, and then you have to figure out what to do with it once it's been raised up. It's like opening that wound. And so for years, I thought that that was the work, and it was really when I learned about neuroplasticity that I began to understand what I think I knew intuitively, which is what we learn, we can unlearn, and that our experiences, our anything that we allow ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves, all of that plays a role in the way in which our brain will adapt and form new neural connections in response to them. And so everything from learning a new language to reciting affirmations every morning. If you tell yourself every single day, that you are a powerful and really intelligent person, your brain will look for evidence that that
Mhm.
is true as well. So there are a lot of ways in which our brain can respond. And so for me, it was, I think, that understanding that, oh, I actually have a role in looking at the ways in which the stories I told myself about my childhood are still showing up in my life. And so whether that's in fear, whether that's in scarcity or lack, whether that is more importantly in the ways in which I played small, the people I allowed myself to be around who could keep me in that kind of energetic. But there were so many different modalities that I explored along the way, from journaling to meditation. I did get a brain scan just to understand what does it look like in there and what's happening. I have a very anxious resting brain, a very active
Yeah,
resting
I got the
brain.
brains scanned too, and there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And that has to do with my days as a professional wrestler and trauma
Ah,
through pro wrestling. So that's where I'm so big into ways. I don't know if you ever had bulletproof coffee. That's something that helps with the brain
yes.
with the what is the oils called? The
MCT.
MCT oils and stuff. And
Yes.
I need to get back to that. But those are the things. So what types of things
Yes.
do you do for neuroplasticity? Because I know the book is going to cover everything, but I'm just intrigued
Yes.
by this whole, what we can do with our health is
Yes.
unreal if we really
Yes.
put our health as our wealth. As I was as Alonzo Mourning was telling me specifically, and how he figured it out, and some other people, if we're not focusing on our health, we
Yes.
can't accomplish anything else.
Yes. I'll give you really simple stuff that I do that anybody can do. Number one, I leave my phone in another part of the house when I go to bed. So my phone is not the first thing that I look at. It is not the last thing that I look at. It's generally a book or my journal. And I think how much of the world we let in, it matters a lot, because that informs a lot of what our thoughts are doing in our brains, right? Another thing, just these are really basic, and I studied neuroscience for business through MIT with Dr. Tara Swart.
Oh
Drink
wow.
water and sleep. It sounds so silly, but it is absolutely critical for you and your brain health to just sleep and drink water. It sounds so basic. Of course, there are certain supplements. I supplement with magnesium. I take magnesium from Moon Juice every night, and that helps with rest. It helps with recovery. It helps with calm and relaxation. I take ashwagandha, and I do take certain supplements that help me with brain stimulation and calm and relaxation, and really priming the brain for good experiences
Yeah.
by helping lower the nervous system. But I walk. I spend a lot of time in nature and the beach. I mean, these are free things. These are basic things that anybody can
That
do.
human
And
beings are not doing.
it's so important, and I'm overstating these because we always are looking for like some wellness thing or some place to go to, and those I think are interventions that typically we introduce once we've burned out, once we don't know what else to do. And if you can just find a way to feed your brain with the oxygen and the water and the fuel
Mm.
and the relaxation that it needs, you'd be shocked at how much it will do for you.
And I've made some of those changes. I have a lot of my clients are in doctors and in health, and I'm finally saying, okay, I have been doing that, but we fall behind. We
Yes.
slide and all
Yes.
that's. So what is your ultimate goal by writing the book? To tell your story, but it looks like I'm focused more on the whole brain, but I'm really to inspire people too, where you've accomplished and where you're going.
Thank you. For me, ultimately, I want people to understand that you get to choose who you become.
Yeah.
We don't earn our beginnings, right? We don't, for better or for worse. We don't get to take credit for that. Our origin stories are what they are, but what we carry is for us to decide. And that through, yes, my story, which can by itself feel very much like a rags to riches story, and it's not about that, which is why I wanted to introduce the science to say that with science and soul work, you can find healing in your life. You can rewire your brain and your body for goodness and for well-being.
Live from the grotto, Greg Hanna. Greg, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and I can't wait to speak to Dr. Michael and jump right in to the first question. Dr. Michael, you have read thousands of nutrition studies. What's one finding that totally surprised you or made you do a double take when you learned about it?
Oh, well, in this new book on longevity, there was a bunch of different surprises. The exercise chapter, I think, will shock people. Sleep, red wine, resveratrol, NAD supplements, vitamin D, fish, protein restriction, microRNAs. The list goes on and on. I learned just as much as anybody reading this book, writing this book, because we weren't taught this kind of stuff in medical school.
And that longevity thing is something I'm living for as I try to kind of reverse aging. As I'm always I'm 52 years old and I'm trying to work on all those things and constantly, and I have all these doctors that are clients of mine telling me what and learning from them. Do you think this is a possibility we can live another? One of my clients is developing stem cell research, Dr. Robert Marks, and he said basically we can live another 80 more years after our lifespan is 79. You see people living into their 150s and 160s if we work on the things that you're saying about longevity?
Well, we certainly never have to date. The question is, what kind of innovations will, for example, AI bring us in terms of longevity science? It's certainly possible. There are animals that essentially live forever with names like the eternal jellyfish. There are whales that live 500, 600 years. Fellow mammals. There's a type of naked mole rat that's essentially a non-aging mammal. So biologically, these things are possible. The fact that from a single zygote, we could explode into, the most complicated mechanism in the universe, the human brain, means basically anything is possible. We have yet to crack the code. But in the meanwhile, while we're waiting for that revolution in longevity science, we need to make it there. We don't want to die the day before the breakthrough. And so we need to live long enough to live forever, or however long that we can live. And for that, it's really some basic, simple, common sense behaviors, such as not smoking, not being obese, regular exercise, more fruits and vegetables. Just those four basic, simple, common sense lifestyle factors can mean literally living a decade longer while you wait for some of the more fundamental revolutions in anti-aging medicine.
Which I want to be part of.
Advice.
I want to create. Go ahead. Go, Greg.
Yeah, you do. I have two questions that I'm very curious about. The benefits of high polyphenol olive oil and krill oil. What's the deal? You hear about these things all the time.
You do, because there are people trying to sell you such things. So polyphenols, there are thousands of different polyphenols, which are phytonutrients found within the plant kingdom. Certainly, the polyphenols in olives are the reason why extra virgin olive oil is preferable to regular olive oil, which is more highly refined. There are more of that you can see and taste and smell the polyphenols. There are bitter compounds in those olives. And so you can randomize people to extra virgin olive oil versus regular olive oil and see all sorts of benefits to the extra virgin olive oil that you don't see in the regular olive oil, which we then attribute to the polyphenols, which are refined out in the refinement process. The question is there something special about the polyphenols in extra virgin olive oil that you don't get from the polyphenols in berries or any other fruits, right? Olives are just fruits. Is there something special about olive oil? Now, maybe raspberries won't taste as good on your pasta or something. There are culinary things to worry about here too. But certainly, if you are going to add an oil to a food, then the least processed, like extra virgin olive oil, would be a good choice.
Now, do you practice what you preach, Dr. Michael?
Well, when I travel, it's not as easy. I did 100 cities speaking tour in 6 months, and but when I'm home, when I actually have control over my life, then I do try to not be a hypocrite and eat healthy by centering my diet around the healthiest food options, which are these, whole plant foods, the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, mushrooms, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, whole grains, the basically real food that grows out of the ground. These are our healthiest choices, and I really do try to stick to them.
Well, you mentioned traveling 100 cities. That's amazing. So you've been in a plane a lot, doing travel constantly. What's your favorite go-to snack at 30,000 feet that's healthy?
Microwave purple sweet potatoes. You take a sweet potato, you throw on your way to the airport while the coffee's going, throw a sweet potato in, a few minutes, you got it. It could be a hand warmer if it's the middle of winter. And then you just whip it out on the plane. You get some weird looks and you just skin and all and just eat it. Very filling, delicious. Yeah, that's one of my favorite. Beyond that, it's mostly just kind of regular kind of trail mix stuff, dried fruit. Nuts, not roasted, not salted, and maybe some kale chips if I'm feeling special. But yeah, those are kind of some of the basics
Great. And you
to help
mentioned
you
purple
while you're being
versus standard. Why the purple?
Oh, purple. Well, so there are special anthocyanin pigments, the berry-like pigments that make purple sweet potatoes purple, and maybe one of the reasons for helping to explain the longevity of the Okinawan Japanese, which a century ago were second longest living population in human history, and 70% of their calories, 70% of their diet was sweet potato based through a combination of different sweet potatoes, including the purple sweet potato.
Cool. We're not
Wow.
talking fried sweet potatoes, though, right?
Right. So basically, however you eat them, however you'd like to eat them, is the way you should eat them to get more of them, with the exception of deep frying. So, like tempura vegetables, not the way to get your vegetables. But beyond that, you can air fry them, though. So you can chop up, air fry them, dredge them in some, rosemary, breadcrumbs, cornmeal, whatever. And absolutely delicious with some salt-free ketchup if you can find it. And you are good to go.
Are you a fan of intermittent fasting, Dr. Michael?
Probably so in my book, How Not to Diet, actually the largest chapter is on intermittent fasting, just because there's so many different types. There's, alternate day fasting, 5-2 fasting, 25-5, fasting mimicking diets, etc. The bottom line, I talk about the pros and cons of each, but late time restricted feeding is probably the best. Early time restricted feeding, meaning if anything, you skip dinner, not breakfast. You're trying to shove as many calories earlier in the day as possible. Our body's better able to deal, so you have less of a blood sugar spike, less of a triglyceride spike to something eaten in the morning versus eaten in the evening. The exact same food eaten in the morning is less fattening than the exact same food, same number of calories eaten in the evening. So if you are going to eat junk, eat it in the morning. Your body's better able to handle it thanks to chronobiology, thanks to our circadian rhythms. So early time restricted feeding, meaning restricting one's daily feeding window to 12 hours or less, but critically important, it's an earlier window rather than later.
Well, one quick question to follow up on the fasting question. I hear a lot of this water fast, water only, 2 weeks, 60 days. I mean, is that safe? Is that?
No, well, not without supervision. So, and this is not just, legalistic, doctor speak, but fasting more than a day or two really has to be done under physician supervision. And the reason is because they need to make sure that your kidneys are doing what they should be doing. We have absolutely remarkable capacities for fasting, such that our body go into sodium conservation mode. So our kidneys hold on to sodium when we stop eating. Now, should that process break down for whatever reason, and you're still passing sodium, then you can actually wash the sodium out of your brain. and get a condition called hyponatremia, such that, and the symptoms are really kind of nebulous. Oh, you feel a little kind of sleepy, a little dizzy, a little whatever. And you'd be like, well, I'm fasting. Well, no wonder I'm feeling a little off today. But the problem is, the next thing happens, you have a seizure, you fall over, crack your skull open, and you're dead.
Yeah.
So normally your kidneys should do what they're doing, but that's why you need to have someone who's actually testing your urine, making sure your body is doing what it's supposed to be doing when you're in fasting mode, and make sure nothing bad happens.
All right, Greg, you have that question, that final question, because we only have a short minute of time. Go ahead and have that final question.
Dr. Michael, this has been amazing, fun. I wish I could talk to you for like the rest of the day, but I got to take my wife to the chiropractor. So let me ask you, little mentoring time for me, for Neil, for everybody listening. What do you feel, doctor, is the most important thing in life you've ever learned?
Wow. Most important thing in life I've ever learned is the realization that the realization of service. That I feel like, of all, I look back at the happiest times of my life, and it's not when like I ate the best food or was on the best roller coaster or whatever. It's times where I feel I've made an impact in other people's lives. And those are the things that really stick with me. And so if I had any advice for my younger self, it would be dedicating one's life to service. And indeed, like all the proceeds from all my books are donated directly to charity. I don't make a penny off them. I just want everyone to enjoy the longest, healthiest life.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
All right. All right. Best place to pick up your book. Where can we go? It's available today,
anywhere,
right?
and
Yeah.
you can go to nutritionfacts.org, where all my work is available free.
So I'm excited to welcome the program Janet Skeslin Charles, and we're going to talk about the Parisian chapter. Am I correct on saying it?
Yes, the Parisian chapter, absolutely.
Parisian chapter. Appreciate you coming by, and tell us this kind of journey of how you became an author, first of all, and then we'll go into the story.
Well, I'm originally from a small town in Montana, and I've always wanted to write. So I was always journaling or watching people or listening and kind of trying to write short stories or poetry. And then I got a job at the American Library in Paris as the programs manager. And I just felt immediately that the place was a novel and started to write. That was in 2010.
Okay. All right. And then you said this is what you love to do.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
All right. So let's kind of like jump into specifically the storyline for this book.
So the storyline of this book is a 20-something who comes to Paris, and she lived next to a war bride, a French war bride. So she had a very romantic idea of what Paris might be. And some of those things are true, the magic of the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre, but some things are not quite so romantic. And she gets a job, and she also works at the American Library in Paris and meets an incredible cast of characters. And so this is her story of growing up and making all those big decisions we make in our 20s about where we work, who our friends are, who we might date and make a life with, and really who we are.
Right, exactly, because that who we are is what defines who we are in so many ways for people around us and everything.
Exactly. Exactly. So she's going through all of these big changes, and it's kind of, I don't know about you in your 20s, but I found it to be a very stressful time. All the doors were open, so it's really exciting to think about all the possibilities, but when there are so many possibilities, it's kind of scary too.
Yeah, when you have so many possibilities, how do you make those decisions? How do you
Exactly.
navigate those? What is the right decision to make? Is it to go
Exactly.
to door A or door B? And why do you think she has so many opportunities?
I think she just, she could stay in Paris, she could go back home, she could date this guy or that guy. She could go forward with her career as a writer or give it up. So she has all of these things that she's thinking about, and sometimes we have this dream, and sometimes dreams come true. Sometimes they take a lot longer to come true than we think they will. And so she's at that point in her life where she's going to have to make some hard decisions.
And do you feel that your character reminds you of you at all?
I think we both worked in the same place. And we both definitely wanted to be writers, but I think Lily was more optimistic than I was, and maybe a bit more hopeful than I was, because I was in my late 30s when I had the job, and she was in her early 20s.
And I see what you're saying. So it's basically a situation where that based on how you felt that story would go, but
Yes.
some of it reminds you. Do you kind of wish some of the characteristics of Lily are like you?
I like her optimism, and I think once we
Hmm.
get older, reality sets in a little bit. So yes, I really like how optimistic she is, and she really helps. She has a best friend who's kind of given up her dream, and so Lily really helps to ignite that fire under her best friend. So, I hope that I'm that kind of a friend where I can help people and help them see their dreams through. I would love to be like that.
And sometimes hard to do that, right? It's hard when we're so caught up in our lives to go to someone else's life and say, okay, I really want to be that good friend, but I got so much going on. Expound on that a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah, expound on
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Well, and it's hard to know, Lily thinks that she knows what's best. And so her friend Mary Louise wants to give up her dream of being an artist because it's just become so kind of demoralizing. There's so much rejection, there's so much competition. And so do you listen to what your best friend is saying? About giving up, or do you kind of push them forward? And that's a hard question to answer because only the best friend knows what's the best. So we
And
can
how
kind of
many how
guess
many
and
best
hope.
friends do we want them to tell us what to do? That's the hard part, right? Do you really want your best friend to say, you shouldn't be doing this? And because sometimes being a hard friend in that advice can lead to a breakup of sorts or a resentment.
Exactly. And I think we don't really talk about friend breakups enough. They can be just as hard as romantic breakups.
Yes.
So
And it's
it's
like
hard to lose a friend. Yeah,
it's hard to lose a friend. It's hard to lose anything. A loss is hard in any way, and we're not taught how to deal with it at the end of
it's
the
so
day.
true.
And
No,
see,
it's so true.
and I think that Lily is something we need to all be, right? We got to look at, man, we have all these opportunities. The mistake we make as human beings is we look at our failures versus all our successes in the day. Okay, we had
Think,
this long
yeah.
day, and the more our day is so many things, there's going to be pitfalls. How do we respond to those pitfalls? Because that leads to other pitfalls, because our human nature takes us into other issues.
Well, and you're so right that a lot of times our brain is just hardwired to focus on what's wrong instead of what's right. And so we think about what we've done wrong instead of all the positive things that we've done. And so you can really spiral really quite quickly. So that's why it's really nice to have a friend who can kind of remind you, who knows you really well and can remind you of all of the successes that you've had, even if you don't feel like, even if you can't remember them, or if you're kind of shy about saying, yeah, that was okay. I did a good job there.
And that's the thing. You did do a good job. And that's what we have to pat ourselves on the back to do. But what do you think causes us to get in our own way? And I think
I don't
Lily
know.
shows that. Lily shows us that we don't have to get in our own way.
No, I read somewhere that it takes three positive um, compliments for us to remember one, for us to forget one negative thing. So it's like 3 to 1 almost, where we're just hardwired to kind of dwell on the negative. And so we really need to be more positive like Lily.
We have to be more wanting our own self validation versus others. I used to always want other people's validation. I sure as heck don't want that anymore. I want the wins, but I don't need to be validated by someone else.
Yeah.
I will get the wins myself and I'll define what my wins are versus other people define them for me.
I think that's so important to kind of set your own goals and to be content with yourself, because if you're looking for that outward validation, you can wait forever.
And moving up the ladder in success in whatever you do or whatever your job or wherever, you're never going to get that. You have to want that self validation. That's very hard. So where's the best place people can go? I know independent bookstores is a great place to pick up the book, but where else?
For my other book, yes, my other books, Miss Morgan's Book Brigade and the Paris Library, I would absolutely say independent bookstores. This book is available, it's an audiobook, so any online realtor, and you can find all of those on my website. The links are all on my website to all of the different online places like Spotify or Libro FM.
What do you think about audiobooks? It's a great new tool for authors.
You know, I listened to Alan Cumming. I was careening through the Rockies on my way home from college. It was a book on tape back then. And it was one narrator, and I was enthralled. I didn't want my trip to end. So I think they were already great, but now, you know, with the music, with multiple narrators, it's sometimes like just watching a movie. It's incredible. It's
All right.
incredible.
Appreciate it. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment. I'm excited to welcome to the show Nikki Spetsaris, and she's going to talk about the ESPN Plus documentary Full Court Press. Nikki, thanks for stopping by. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What inspired you to direct the second season of Full Court Press?
I mean, why wouldn't you want to? I have been waiting for these, women's sports documentary series to really take off for most of my career. So now that these are happening, I jumped at the chance to be a part of it. And, 3 production companies are behind this. They're all very supportive. So I feel like we had all the resources to make a great show.
Oh, absolutely. How did you choose which athletes to feature this season?
It's really hard because obviously there's just so many talented athletes and good stories out there. I think that we did try to choose programs from across the country, different styles of coaching. All 3 of these women are at different stages in their college careers, and they have very different personalities off the court. So I think we just wanted a good mix, and hopefully, I think that people will tune in and they'll kind of have a favorite to root for. And having just a mix of personalities and locations seemed to help that attract to more people.
What was the most challenging part of filming this documentary series?
Yeah, I think that, we all come in with a lot of big creative ideas. And then with documentary work, especially with sports that are so consuming, you end up having to pivot and change the plan all the time. I think some, added layers of that is following college aged athletes. They have school, they have sports. Now they have different NIL deals. They also have their, family and personal obligations. So just scheduling the actual logistics is the hardest part. Sometimes we would plan to film for a day, and we'd every hour is accounted for when you're with a film crew, right? And then practice would all of a sudden, the time would change, or it would get canceled, and we just have to shift what the whole day was about. So yeah, just kind of rolling with it and being open to what these athletes are naturally doing, and not trying to kind of force anything too much.
Yeah, because you force things too much, it's just it's a problem for sure. And it's just you never know what you're gonna create when you're filming, right?
Yeah, I think you go in with ideas of who these characters are, and kind of some big storylines, but then you have to let it guide you, And I think the most interesting one was Flau'jae Johnson is very busy. I mean, all of these women are, but Flau'jae has, more NIL deals than almost any other athlete. And we just knew when we would end up in Baton Rouge that we'd have to like throw the plan out the window. And that was part of the fun of it, but also, you got to have the right people on your team that will just kind of roll with it. And yeah, the fact that we did that, Flau'jae opened up to us and trusted us because we were kind of on her timeline,
And her timeline, you just never know. And it's amazing how big college women's basketball has become.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think that obviously last year was a breakout year, and I think a lot of people had questions if this season could sustain that momentum. And I think, obviously it has. More people have tuned in. They're still getting high ratings. People are talking about women's hoops, and hopefully a show like this just keeps moving the needle forward.
I mean, think about the NBA and Bird and Magic, and now see what's happened with the WNBA, how it's really just exploded the sport altogether for women.
Yeah, I think it's super exciting. And I think that, for me, it's a long time coming, right? But I just think the more stories that are told and the more, primetime games, the more the spotlight shines on women's hoops, the more people will just become fans.
Well, the way things have changed, Nikki, is before it used to be, okay, we only broadcast to one channel, one group of people, and that's all we focus our marketing intention to. Now there's so many people have communities, and these communities build this gigantic ecosystem. And this is what's happening with women's college hoops and WNBA. Is this a different community that doesn't watch other sports but only stays into women's hoops? Do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I feel like the more I've been out and about in different parts of the country filming this show, you just talk to people, right? That's my nature. And there's a lot of fans that you would anticipate, like just former female athletes like myself. But I talk to a lot of men who are like, oh my God, it's so exciting. They're so physical. They pass the strap, And it's just so funny how many men tune in thinking they might not enjoy it, and then they get hooked. And then I do think hopefully there's this new crop of boys and girls that are just, it won't be weird for them. They'll just be women's hoops
No,
fans
exactly.
from a young age.
They have an opportunity not just to get a college scholarship, but make money. I mean, that just adds a new profession to the game of college hoops. And what are your thoughts again on the NIL deals and stuff? Do you think it's a long time coming for athletes in college?
Yeah, listen, I think obviously these athletes, it is a full-time job. I mean, just being around them, they might practice 2 or 3 times a day. They do recovery, they go weightlifting. They obviously do press, and obligations for the school, donor meetings. So yes, I obviously think that they should be compensated, and I think that's fair. I think the layer as a filmmaker is, they're busier than ever. They're balancing school, sport, and now all these business opportunities. But I do think at least these 3 women, they really balance with grace, and I can't believe how much they do. And hopefully it's just teaching them, they all have these dreams of being business moguls and having their own foundations and having their own businesses. So I don't know. I think, it adds some hardship to their schedules, but I also think, bigger and better things will come out
Exactly.
of it.
It's all about brand. And if people understand, even if you're just a successful top college athlete, if you take that to the professional world because you didn't get to play, but probably they would play in overseas, but after that time, that brand will create a career that they never thought they could come up with, and this is the opportunities that brand brings. Once you have a brand, it's difficult to not have opportunities. That's the thing. I have conversations with the athletes all the time saying, do you know how much powerful your brand is? And, they're trying to carve new careers. I said, this is an opportunity. Just take it the same way you do athletics into the professional entrepreneur world. And then it's a lot of fun. You just got to
No,
really.
it's been really cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, just watching, when I wasn't on the road, when I was just watching March Madness games from home or the hotel, I mean, every other commercial was Flage was a lot of them, but
Yeah.
these big women's college hoop stars. I mean, we're talking, Powerade and Nike and
Right.
Red Bull and Kiki has the first Skechers deal, and they're just the brands. This is kind of the start of it, right?
Right. And then they need to study. And then also the people around them need to study Michael Jordan, study Magic Johnson, study some of the people, all the brands. They kept that brand going forever to creating this next level. It's all about an evolution. And hopefully the people around them see that evolution. I had a conversation with a sports agent who said basically to me, hey, Neil, that's the big thing is we have to get to parents early so that they get the right advice because they're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
However, what are they going to do with that money? And how are they going to invest it and then have a great career after sports? That's the big thing that is a challenge that everyone has to go with when an opportunity comes your way. Where can people check out the documentary? I can't wait to watch it. It's on ESPN Plus. How can we catch up?
Yep. 2 episodes are on ESPN Plus already and Hulu, and then 2 more episodes air Sunday on ESPN2, and then we'll be on ESPN Plus immediately following.
All right, fantastic. I love it. Thanks again for stopping by. I appreciate it.